we just graphed this sine function, so now let's talk about its properties. So down below here I've written out some of the properties that this function has. So first of all, it has odd symmetry. So if you look at the picture, you know this part goes up because sine is positive in the first quadrant, but then sine is negative in the fourth quadrant. So if we go backwards into these negative coterminal angles that are in the fourth quadrant, this is negative. So an x value here would give a positive y value, but the opposite x value would give a negative y value. That is odd symmetry, symmetric around the origin, or 180-degree symmetry where it looks the same upside down as it does right side up. The period of this graph is 2 pi because that's how far we have to go from the x-axis at 0, 0, up to the maximum at 1, down to the minimum at -1, and back up to 0, 0 before it repeats again. So the period is one repeat, one cycle of the graph. Domain can be any real numbers from -infinity to positive infinity because the domain is the angle, and we know from coterminal angles that we can go from infinitely negative to infinitely positive. The x-intercepts are happening everywhere we have integer values of pi. So we could indicate all of those values with k, where k is any integer. So k could be 0, k could be 1, k could be -1. Those are all going to be x-intercepts of the graph. I like to call these particular intercepts the 5 key points. So we have the 3 intercepts at 0, 0, pi 0, and 2 pi 0, but then we have our maximum at pi halves 1 here, and our minimum at 3 pi halves -1 here. So together these 3 intercepts and the minimum and maximum create our 5 key points. If you are able to sketch in the 5 key points, then you can sketch in the graph. And as we start to transform these, we will focus on those 5 key points. Or another name for them sometimes is called the quarter marks, because it's basically taking the period of the graph from 0 to 2 pi and breaking it into quarters. So half of it would be at pi, a quarter of that would be at pi halves, and then another quarter at 3 pi halves. So by doing the 5 key points, we are doing quarter marks of our graph, if that makes sense. The amplitude of our graph is 1 because it's a distance of 1 from 0 up to the maximum and then from 0 down to the minimum, with our midline at the x-axis at 0. So up 1 amplitude, down 1 amplitude. The range is from -1 to 1, so we have a range distance of 2, but an amplitude of 1. And of course I just mentioned this, but the midline would be, in this case, at y equals 0, or the x-axis. Alright, we're going to go on and look at the cosine graph and see in what ways it's the same and what ways it is different.